Chapter 1 opens at the memorial service of Catherine May Tyler Lewis, a matriarch whose remains were never found after the Liberian Civil War. A symbolic casket holds her Bible, family photos, her late husband's portrait, a white rose, and the Liberian flag. Hundreds have come to pay tribute to her. Her children and grandchildren are among them. Bendu, Rendu Lewis, the granddaughter, is especially shaken because she was the last to see her grandmother alive and she witnessed her die during their desperate flight from war. The chapter then shifts into Bendu's memory. She recalls fleeing Chalu town with her sick grandmother in a rusty wheelbarrow while chaos erupted around them. Villagers dropped their belongings, abandoned babies, children were trampled, the elderly left behind. Others urged Bendu to leave the old woman, but she refused. She pushed on, blistered and exhausted, until her grandmother whispered for her to go on without her, then died in her arms. Moments later, fighters led by Commander Cobra appeared. Bendu, broken and unwilling to live, confronted them defiantly but was beaten, dragged away and forced into captivity. This marked the beginning of a year of trauma with rebel fighters that would scar her life permanently. The narrative then snaps back to the present memorial service showing Bendu surrounded by family, friends and colleagues. Outwardly she appears supported, but inwardly she is haunted by memories she cannot share. For her, the war is not something that can be forgotten or dismissed. Its horrors live inside her unresolved. Chapter 2 Moses Varney arrives at the Temple of Justice, courthouse in Monrovia, thinking about the old slogan on his dashboard, "In the cause of the people, the struggle continues." We learn that he is a man shaped by loss and struggle. Most significantly, the bus crash that killed his parents when he was 11. This tragedy left him with a deep sense of responsibility for vulnerable kids on the street, a small group of boys who recognize him as a father figure. Varney quietly promises to himself that he won't forget them. Standing before the courtroom door, he hesitates, reflects on the failure of Liberia's institutions, and steels himself to act. Convinced that peace is meaningless without justice and equity for ordinary people. Chapter 3 Bendu returns to Monrovia and to her workplace at the NGO Peace in Practice, PIP. After her grandmother's memorial, the chapter mixes Bendu's practical day, Broad Street, the smell of sewage, the whitewashed PIP office with memories of the war and the Women's Peace March that reminds her why she does this work. At PIP, she reunites with Agnes, co-director, and prepares for a 10 o'clock appointment. Agnes teases Bendu about romantic prospects, especially Calvin Daniels, a friend and potential donor. Calvin arrives to interview Bendu for an article for World Journal, a plum assignment covering the Mono River region. Their conversation is professional but warm. He asks probing questions about the NGO's work and about Bendu herself. When he gently presses for Bendu's personal story, she deflects, unwilling to dig up the deep wounds the war left in her. The chapter ends with Bendu avoiding going deeper into her own trauma, instead attending to the group counseling session and the work that grounds her. Let's discuss our thoughts on the characters so far, particularly how their pasts influence their decisions and actions in the present. We also want to know what themes have stood out to you and how the author develops them in the first few chapters. So let's start by talking about Bendu. We see her at her grandmother's funeral, trying to hold it together while dealing with intense grief. But we also get glimpses of a deeper pain when we see her pushing the grandmother in the wheelbarrow. What might that suggest about her past? How do you think her experience as a child has affected her outlook on life now? Then there's Moses Werner. His backstory, including the loss of his parents, reveals why he's dedicated to helping kids on the streets of Monrovia. His quiet strength and determination to bring about positive change in the community emerge as key aspects of his character. As for Calvin Daniels, he seems like a well-meaning individual, but we're eager to learn more about his motivations and how he might challenge or support Bendu's work. These three characters, each grappling with their past in different ways, set the stage for the story, hinting at the complexities that lie ahead. But they're not the only ones. Consider the other figures in Bendu's life, her friends and colleagues at PIP, and the various individuals she encounters while carrying out her grandmother's remains. Each person adds another layer to the narrative, shaping Bendu's journey and offering insights into Liberian society and culture. Similarly, the presence of characters like Commander Cobra, a ruthless warlord, and Agnes, Bendu's co-worker, adds depth and intrigue to the story. They represent different forces at play in the narrative, creating both challenges and support systems for Bendu as she navigates her work and personal life. Now let's move on to our second prompt. We want to hear your thoughts on a central theme emerging in the story, the relationship between the past and the present. How does the novel explore the idea that the past is never truly gone? Notice how the story begins with a funeral, setting the tone for a narrative that grapples with death, remembrance, and the weight of history. Through flashbacks, we witness pivotal moments from Bendu's past, such as the death of her grandmother and her traumatic experiences during the war. These memories don't just shape Bendu's character, they also serve as a reminder of the lasting impact of the conflict on individuals and communities. The novel suggests that the scars of the past run deep and continue to influence people's lives long after the events have transpired. Moreover, the presence of the war in Bendu's present is palpable, the mention of landmines, the lingering fear of violence, and the need for healing and reconciliation highlight the ongoing consequences of war. The story underscores the idea that the past is not merely a distant memory, but an integral part of the present that demands acknowledgement and attention as Bendu confronts her past. Whether through therapy or interactions with characters like Calvin, the narrative emphasizes the importance of confronting and understanding history to pave the way for healing and progress. The novel prompts readers to consider how the past continues to shape the present and to recognize the significance of addressing historical issues to build a better future. What stands out to you about the writing style, character development, or plot? How does the novel make you feel and why? If you could ask the author a question, what would it be? Chapter 4 opens with a scene at Peace in Practice or PIP. It's a Monday morning and Bendu leads a group counseling session. There are 3 women there: Rosetta, Josephine, and Tenna. Each woman is still bearing the psychological scars left by the Civil War. Rosetta is angry and bitter because her husband was killed in the ethnic killing carried out by the rebels. Because of this loss, she has developed a hatred for all men and accuses them of being violent and abusive. She uses stereotypes and generalizations to make her points, saying that men are naturally aggressive and don't deserve the love of women. She also believes that the war made things worse for men and that they are now too dangerous to be around. Josephine, on the other hand, is warm, maternal, and talkative. She is an optimistic person who tries to see the good in everything and everyone. She listens attentively to the other women and responds by sharing her experiences and offering advice. Tenna is a new member of the group and much younger than the others. She is quiet, withdrawn, and depressed. She doesn't want to talk about her past or her feelings and spends most of her time staring at the ground. Bendu encourages her to open up and join the discussion, but Tenna hesitates. During the session, Bendu asks the women to read letters they have written to significant people in their lives. Tenna is reluctant, but eventually reads a letter addressed to her mother. The letter reveals a shocking truth. Teneth was only 12 years old when the war broke out. She remembers how she and her little brother Toto were hiding in the bush with their mother. One day, their mother left them to go to the market, promising to return soon. However, she never came back. Eventually, Toto became weak and sick, and their mother had sent them to fighters to save their lives. But those men did bad things to her and took Toto away. She feels betrayed, angry, and hopeless. Bendu asks Tenna why she thinks her mother did that, and Tenna replies that she doesn't know. But she does say that she blames her mother for what happened to her. Bendu tells her that it wasn't her fault, but that of the men who did bad things to her. But Tenna still blames her mother. Bendu ends the session by telling the women that they are not victims, but survivors. She says that they have been through a lot of pain and suffering, but they are still alive and kicking. They have the strength and courage to keep going and to make something of themselves. She also tells them that they should not waste their lives on hate and revenge, but on hope and forgiveness. After the session, Bendu feels satisfied and proud of herself. She thinks that she is doing a good job at PIP and that she is helping the women to heal and grow. However, she also feels sad and heavy-hearted. She thinks of Tenna and her tragic story, and she wonders if she will ever find peace and happiness. Bendu decides to throw herself into work and write a grant proposal for PIP. As the sun sets, she walks home alone. On the way, she chats with vendors and beggars, greeting them warmly and exchanging pleasantries. She is happy to be alive and to be among her people. But this joy is short-lived. Suddenly, she sees a man who she recognizes as Commander Cobra, the rebel leader who tortured her during the war. She is shocked and terrified, and she quickly hides in a nearby ruined building. Bendu tries to calm herself down, but she is shaking and sweating. She hears Cobra talking to someone on the phone, and she peeks out to see him. He is older and fatter now, but she knows it's him. She sees him walk away and she follows him from a distance. She wants to confront him, but she is afraid. She goes home and locks herself in her room. She is traumatized by the experience and she can't sleep. She keeps thinking about Cobra and what he might do to her. She remembers the atrocities he committed and the horrors she witnessed during the war. She feels vulnerable and exposed, and she fears for her safety. In Chapter 5, Bendu is having a nightmare. She is back in the bush with the rebels, and she sees Cobra and his men torturing and executing civilians. She wakes up screaming and sweating, and she realizes it was just a dream. But she still feels scared and shaken. She looks at herself in the mirror and sees a tired, haggard woman looking back at her. She feels like she is still in the war, and she wonders if she will ever be free from the trauma. Just then, she hears a knock on the door, and she opens it to see Agnes standing there. Agnes is her friend and colleague at PIP, and she is worried about Bendu because she hasn't been answering her calls or messages. Bendu lets her in and they chat about various topics. Bendu tries to hide her distress. But Agnes notices that she is not her usual bubbly self. She is pale, shaky and tearful. And she keeps mentioning Cobra and the war. Agnes asks Bendu if she has seen Cobra, and Bendu hesitates, but then admits that she has. She tells Agnes that she saw him in the marketplace and that it triggered her PTSD. Agnes tells Bendu that it was just a normal day and that there is no reason to be afraid. She says that Cobra can't hurt her anymore because he is old and weak now. But Bendu isn't so sure. She tells Agnes that she saw a fire in his eyes and she felt a chill in her heart. She says that she is afraid he will come for her and finish the job he started. Agnes tells Bendu to stop being silly and face the reality. She says that Cobra is gone for good and that she should move on with her life. But Bendu isn't convinced. She tells Agnes that she saw Cobra at night and that he might strike any time. She says that she needs protection and help, but Agnes tells her that she doesn't need either. She says that she should be grateful to be alive and well and not waste her time and energy on ghosts. Bendu hangs up the phone and goes back to bed. But she can't sleep. She keeps thinking about Cobra and wondering what he's doing back in Liberia. She also wonders if he is still dangerous and if he is looking for her. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments below. Please like, comment and share. Chapter 7. In Chapter 7, Moses Varney visits Judge Solomon Dogose, a man infamous for his corruption, to secure his support for their cause. The chapter dramatizes the paradox of seeking justice through unjust means. Varney despises the judge for embodying everything wrong with Liberia's justice system is greed. His complacency, his belly literally swollen with excess, yet he feels compelled to bribe him in order to advance the struggle for liberation. Shaw carefully juxtaposes Varney's revolutionary motives with Dogose's self-serving outlook. For Varney, redemption is the liberation of ordinary Liberians from exploitative land, labor, and social systems that force people like his driver Weir into armed struggle. For Dogose, however, redemption means freedom from poverty through ill-gotten wealth. When Varney lays the bundles of cash before the judge, the gesture becomes both a necessary evil and a painful irony. The revolution's promise of justice begins by feeding the same system of corruption it seeks to overthrow. This chapter captures the deep moral compromises that revolutionary actors face, highlighting the messy entanglement of idealism and pragmatism in a nation struggling toward freedom. Chapter 8. Chapter 8 turns to Calvin's relentless search for Commander Cobra. Paralleled with Bendu's gradual recovery and her ongoing psychological torment, Calvin's quest represents a thirst for justice, but also exposes his deeper prejudices and unresolved wounds from Liberia's past. At his poolside gathering with Bendu and Ciotta, their nostalgic laughter soon dissolves into heated discussions about war atrocities, survival, and culpability. Calvin's cold declaration, "Their war stories don't move me one bit," shocks the sisters, revealing his bitterness and tribal resentment. He insists that even women and children bore guilt, complicating the narrative of innocent victims versus perpetrators. Through this conversation, Shaw exposes the complex moral terrain of civil conflict, where survival often blurred lines between victims and aggressors. For Bendu, who privately battles memories of her own coerced complicity during captivity, Calvin's words sting deeply. She silently echoes Ciotta's insistence that no individual should be punished for the sins of their ancestors, yet questions whether her own past makes her culpable. The chapter weaves memory, trauma, and political debate into a layered reflection on responsibility and forgiveness, showing that post-war healing is not merely personal but also collective. Chapter 9. The 9th chapter takes readers back into Bendu's harrowing past at Duma camp under Commander Cobra's control. The narrative begins with Cobra's casual brutality, murdering to fighters merely to test his gun, establishing the atmosphere of terror that governs the camp. Through the eyes of Bendu and her caretaker Mamusu, the camp emerges as both a microcosm of chaos and a distorted community, where fear and survival intermingle with moments of solidarity. Mamusu, wise and compassionate, tries to soothe Bendu's fears, insisting that Cobra's violence often stems from drug-induced madness, and that even he sometimes feels remorse afterward. Yet her words, "War makes all of us crazy," underscore the normalization of cruelty in such a fractured society. Bendu's recollection of her capture, her grandmother's death, cousin Orlando's abduction, and their forced transport further illustrates the indiscriminate destruction of families and communities. The chapter ends chillingly with Cobra designating Bendu as Samson's new wife, a euphemism for sexual enslavement. Here, Shaw lays bare the gendered violence of war, where women's bodies become both spoils and tools of control. Bendu's survival instinct, however, remains evident, though terrified. She resolves that she had to stay alive. This moment encapsulates both the depths of her trauma and the fragile thread of resilience that will carry her forward. In Chapter 10 of Redemption Road, Elma Shaw brings Bendu face to face with her deepest fear, Commander Cobra in broad daylight. The chapter begins innocently enough, with Bendu waking to the chirping of pepperbirds and the calls of a Yana boy selling soap. These ordinary sounds reassure her that she is at home in Monrovia and not trapped in the horrors of Duma. But this fragile peace is shattered when Cobra suddenly calls her name in the street. Shaw juxtaposes the mundane bustle of vendors selling biscuits and candies with the looming figure of Cobra, showing how trauma can intrude even in ordinary spaces. Cobra greets her warmly, calling her by her wartime nickname Lieutenant TKO and laughing about her past defiance. To Bendu, however, his casual tone is both mocking and menacing. The man who destroyed her life now acts as though they are old comrades. Though her heart races with fear, she conceals her fury, holding her purse tightly as a source of control. The brief exchange reveals two contrasting realities. For Cobra, the war is a memory laced with dark humor, while for Bendu, it remains an unhealed wound. Her contempt for his new alias, V. Moses Varney, culminates in her silent renaming of him as vile, vicious animal. This chapter encapsulates the core conflict whether one can ever truly escape the past when perpetrators walk freely, rewriting history in their own terms. Leave a comment down below telling us what you think about this episode, and if there is anything you would like to see us do differently or do more of.